This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Africa with insights into Africa's ever-changing business landscape. I am Peninah Karibe in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, where it's 9 p.m. It is 2 p.m. in Washington, D.C., 2 a.m. in Beijing. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to the show. As always, we begin with a look at the markets. U.S. stocks jumped today as investors bet that one of the country's most divisive presidential races would end with a clear victory for Democratic nominee Joe Biden and a swift deal on more fiscal stimulus. All 11 major S&P indexes were up in early trading, led by financial, healthcare and industrial stocks. Arista Networks jumped 18.6% among the leading gainers on the benchmark S&P 500 after the network gearmaker reported a better-than-expected quarterly profit. Coming up on the show tonight, South Sudan's central bank governor fired as the country grapples with a weakening economy. South Africa's National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union to protest the recently announced wage freeze. And Uganda grapples with dwindling farmer numbers as young people shun the practice. We begin in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir has fired Central Bank Governor Jamal Wani. In a presidential decree on Monday, Kiir appointed former Governor Dier Tong to replace Wani. The new central bank governor previously served in the same position from May 2018 to January this year, when President Kiir dismissed him and appointed Wani. In September this year, President Kiir also sacked the Minister of Finance and Planning, Salvatore Garang, and the acting National Revenue Authority Commissioner General, Ejok Bulen Geu. Now let's discuss this further with Patrick Koyet, who's live for us from South Sudan's capital, Juba. Patrick, this is the second time the country's central bank governor is being fired this year. Did the president state why the governor was fired?
Peninah, the president has not said why the governor was fired. In most cases in South Sudan, the president doesn't actually explain why he is making changes. This is one because sometimes those officials who are fired, later you find them bouncing back either in the same position or even in a more senior position. So you find the president not explaining why he's firing these officials. But the president of late has been making a lot of changes. For example, the country now has a new head of revenue authority, he's a Tanzanian, and also there has been changes, of course, in the Ministry of Finance. There's a new finance minister. So the president is actually desperate to find a way of, salvaging the economy. He has also formed what he calls Economic Crisis Management Committee, which is also trying to look for ways of salvaging the economy. The economy is not doing well. Of course, the country is just emerging from war and there is no much production. So many things are imported, including onions, tomatoes, beans, name them. And this requires dollar. The COVID-19 impact has, of course, made the global oil price to go down. The country depends on oil money, and therefore these dollars that are required are not there. So the economy is not doing well, and the president is trying to build a team to ensure that the economy is salvaged. But nothing much is also coming up, and no reason has been given for the changes that has been made in the central bank for now.
Okay, so the president desperate to show up the economy, Patrick, and curiously, he reinstated the previous central bank governor that he had fired this year in January. Again, any explanations why he did that?
Peninah, nothing has been explained as far as that is concerned. But what has been the tradition in the Central Bank of South Sudan is that we've not seen majorly outsiders coming into the bank, or even the person who has been fired now, Jamal. He has been in the bank for long years, and the same to the one who has now been, appointed as the governor. He has been in the banking system, including being a deputy governor, and then later was elevated to a governor. He stayed there for about 2 years. He was fired. They brought in a new one, who is Jamal. Jamal has not lasted, of course, a year. He has now also left. So we've seen a tradition where in South Sudan the governors of the bank normally come from the bank. So perhaps one of the reasons as to why he has been brought back is because he has been in the system. He knows what is there, and also there is a suspicion that perhaps recommendation from this Economic Crisis Management Committee and the new team that the president is trying to build to salvage the economy is what has made him bounce back to the same position he held before, Peninah.
Okay, so Patrick, you did talk about South Sudan's economy, which is on a bind, and government announced last month it would change the currency in a bid to improve the economic situation. Where are we on that? When is this likely to happen?
Yeah, the government has actually just spoken to us last Friday. We were asking the same kind of questions, and they say that this seems to be something that is going to still take some time. They said when they brought the issue out, they wanted to see the reaction from the public. So there has been a lot of reaction to the statement that they wanted to change the currency, including economists have been talking. They've been saying that it's not a very viable option now because, one, the money that is going to be used to print new currency is a lot. That money, if injected into the economy at the moment, it would stabilize the economy. That is number one. They are also saying that the economy of South Sudan is a cash economy. Many people keep money away from the banks. They don't want to take their money to the bank. And reasons are, one, for example, they don't trust the banks because when war broke out in 2016, the banking system crashed. Many people could not access their money that were in the account. You would go to the bank to get $100, you would not get because the banks did not have money, because the government borrowed heavily from the central bank, and the central bank had money of the commercial bank. So that is one. Number two, economists also say that perhaps some people have gotten the money through fraudulent means, so they don't want to take the money to the bank because they fear that they would be questioned where they got the money. So they are saying unless the government addresses those issues, even if they bring a new currency, it would just be a matter of time before people collect all the new currency, take them home, and then still the economy would have a similar kind of a problem. So economists are saying that the government should first address these challenges that are there, and then if they want to change the currency, perhaps if they bring, then the economy would be up and running. So this is still something that is going to take some time, if at all the change of the currency will ever take place.
All right, Patrick, we appreciate those insights. Thank you very much for joining us, Patrick Oyet, live in Juba, South Sudan. Now, in South Africa, the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union is planning a major strike at the end of this month. This is in response to the government's decision to freeze public sector wages. The union said it will convene a national day of action in the form of marches to be directed to both the union building and national parliament on the 26th of this month. The union accused Finance Minister Tito Mboweni and the National Treasury of reversing the hard-won gains of workers while abandoning collective bargaining. All right, so let's get more on this story. And Angelo Coppola is live for us in Johannesburg. So, Angelo, the public workers are planning a major strike action at the end of this month. Is the threat real, and how much of an impact is it likely to have on the country?
Well, look, the strike is going to happen. There's no question about it. Public workers make up a large proportion of the membership of the bigger unions in the country. They affect, in fact, almost every part of people's lives who are operating here. And most of those workers are going to heed that call for to be on the streets on the 26th. But the question here really is that it's in 3 weeks' time, and currently there are public gathering limitations because of COVID, and it's limiting 500 people per march, as it were. So, and there's still got to be social distancing. And without sounding too cynical, it's been suggested that government probably won't lower the lockdown level to 0 or -1 for that matter, to allow more workers to gather legally on the streets. Whether, of course, members are going to be adhering to that call and are going to be keeping to the rules in terms of social distancing and the number of people allowed remains to be seen. Of course, camera footage of small crowds aren't going to have that desired effect on public sympathy for the union and for its cause. If the strike, of course, lasts longer than one day, that's a different story altogether. But one day on a strike, not going to make any difference at all. And in fact, if it carries on for a week or so and the garbage starts piling up and social services aren't being delivered, then we're going to have a different proposition on our hands. But as a one-day limited number of people event, there's going to be minimal impact. Peninah.
Here's the thing, Angelo. It's been a tough year for South Africa. By early this year, it was formally in a recession after recording 2 successive quarters of negative economic growth. And then there was the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still ongoing, and the hard lockdown. And now we're seeing figures indicating the economy is projected to contract by almost 8% this year. Is all of this lost on the union workers? I mean, what options are they presenting as alternatives that government can dig into to meet their demands?
Well, look, it does appear that it is lost on those workers who are employed, and they aren't offering any options or solutions. They want the last leg of that negotiated and signed 2008 wage deal, an agreement implemented, pure and simple. There's no discussion about it. They say they're entitled to that increase at least. And in some regards, I guess they do have a point contractually. We don't know, of course, how many public sector people or workers have actually lost their jobs. My guess is none since the start of the pandemic and the lockdowns. And then you've got to compare that to the 2 million odd people who lost their jobs in that first quarter of that lockdown, and the countless others who took salary sacrifices as the companies they worked for stopped doing business of any kind. And let's also remember that while the inflation number in South Africa is currently at around 3.1% for people earning a static salary like the public sector workers, they will feel that impact, but not as much as those people who are newly unemployed. So there's likely to be some animosity between the employed public workers and the private sector people who are unemployed or who took salary sacrifices in this time. Peninah?
Okay, so besides the wage freeze, Angelo, what are the austerity measures is government exploring to address the issue of economic growth and recovery?
Well, look, the MP medium-term budget policy statement earlier did talk about that, and that's an issue that Nahahu has also raised. We understand that the provincial equitable share from government is going to be reduced by some 60 million rand next year and in 2022, with more cuts in the next 2 years after that. Transfers from to local government from central government will also be reduced by around 17.7 billion. There's also some 2.7 billion that's going to be removed from the general fuel levy and around 569 million from direct conditional grants. Then, of course, there's a plan to lower the estimated spending on the National Skills Fund and sector education and training authorities by around 2.8 billion, and that's just for next year. It's going to be dropping some more in the next 2 years after that. This all means that service delivery is going to suffer in those areas, as most municipalities aren't in a position to actually raise revenue for themselves from residents. And of course, bear in mind that many of those residents can't actually afford to pay for the services that they currently get because they're unemployed. So it's not a rosy picture by any stretch of the imagination, Peninah.
All right, Angelo, we appreciate that update. Thank you very much. Angelo Kopler live in Johannesburg. Now let's stay in South Africa. And the Mineral Resources and Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, says the government recognizes the critical attributes that support junior mining exploration. These include regulatory certainty, transparency in the licensing system, and investment in pre-competitive geology. Once again, Angelo Kopler gives us the details.
Mantashe was speaking to delegates at the Junior Mining Indaba in Johannesburg. One of the big bugbears has been the regulatory certainty concerning black economic empowerment.
We don't want established companies to have an excuse of not doing exploration because we were forcing them on BE requirement. We say on exploration, you are free to do, but when you start production, BE requirements should be done.
It all started going forward with the mining charter and the very clear state that mining charter does not require BEE. So that stimulates and opens the door for investment to start happening because the investment imperative is right now.
The upside of Mantashe's speech, according to analysts, was his passion about the role of junior mining and its job creation opportunities.
The bad news is government's going to play this big role. And we know governments anywhere in the world don't do a very good job playing a big role. And we know this government in particular does a horrible job of playing a big role. So anything dependent on the government here is not going to go.
On the other hand, some mine operators believe that all stakeholders, including government, have a role to play, especially when it comes to the junior mining strategy that's being developed.
We're workshopping it. We're collaboratively coming to a point that the next step now would be to socialize it with all the stakeholders, get everybody's input. But we needed to see that we've got something that we can both support, because there's no point if the stakeholders agree, but it's industry and government can't agree whatsoever on it, then we're going nowhere. So we're getting to the point now that we can get everybody involved and work through the process to bring in this to a conclusion.
Foreign junior miners are loath to increase their activities locally at the moment due to legacy issues, including prospecting licenses and permits, with little attention paid to grassroots projects and incentives.
There needs to be a revived, incentivized interest in exploration itself, in grassroots early stage exploration, or incentivizing programs.
It seems like the mining industry, and specifically the junior miners, have a plan. That strategy is going to be discussed, everybody's pulling in the right direction, and hopefully we're going to see some activity. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In some corporate headlines, Telkom South Africa says that a tight check on costs is poised to pay off as the operator sees higher earnings. This is despite the deepest economic downturn in generations. Shares in the company, 40% owned by the government, logged their biggest one-day gain on Tuesday. Netflix will on Thursday debut its first Egyptian television series, Paranormal, in a major step in the company's Middle Eastern strategy. The series is based on Egyptian novelist Ahmed Khaled Tawfiq's books about a doctor whose lifelong scientific convictions are suddenly called into question. His critically acclaimed novels in Arabic have sold more than 15 million copies. The owner of furniture brand IKEA accelerated profit growth in the 12 months through August despite COVID-19. Shoppers stuck inside spent more on furnishing their homes, and lower wood prices helped boost margins. Inter IKEA Group, a franchisor to store owners, said its pre-tax profit grew 13% to $2.36 billion. And Saudi Arabian state-oil group Aramco has reported a 44.6% drop in third-quarter net profit. This is in line with analysts' estimates. Income was dented by lower crude oil prices and volumes as the coronavirus crisis choked demand. The company said it would distribute a dividend of $18.75 billion for the third quarter of this year, in line with its plan to pay a base dividend of $75 billion for 2020. Dividends from the company help Saudi Arabia manage its budget deficit. That's a look at your corporate news. You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. Tunisian power utility completes transmission line in Rwanda. And Egyptian companies to help in the reconstruction of Iraq.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Situated in the winelands region of South Africa, Wellington is the only town apart from Cape Town where minstrel troops celebrate New Year, a culture that's been around since the days of slavery. The carnival brings joy and a sense of belonging to the many communities where alcohol and drug abuse are rife and half the youth is unemployed.
Music is a sweet thing. Music brings people together. Music will stop violence.
Concerned community members believe that by encouraging the youth to join in this vibrant tradition, they will follow an alternative path to a more positive future.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Tunisia's state-owned power utility has commissioned an 83-kilometer transmission line in Rwanda, connecting the country's south to suburbs in the capital, Kigali. The project is one of several deals that were signed in April 2017 to address Rwanda's energy needs. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnet Shawashi with the details.
The Tunisian Electricity and Gas Company International Services, STEC International Services IS, successfully commissioned 83 kilometers of 220 kilovolt and 110 kilovolt transmission lines from Mamba, south of Rwanda, up to Ganga in the suburbs of Kigali. These works in Rwanda are the first phase of the electricity transmission project that was signed between STEC International Services and the Energy Development Corporation Limited 3 years ago. STEC IS also succeeded in commissioning a 220 kilovolt substation in Mamba that will evacuate power from the power plant that is still under construction.
This power plant is successful. We are proud of this achievement in Rwanda. It was developed by Tunisian professionals who've proven that a Tunisian company can realize gigantic electricity projects. STEG International Services is a good model and example for other Tunisian enterprises.
The project is divided into two main parts, the transmission lines and the high-voltage substations.
The lines, there are two types of line. There are 220 kilovolt lines, which are a total of 60 kilometers, 170 towers. And there is the 110 kV lines with a total of 40 kilometers and 120-something towers. For the substations, there are three substations. There is Mamba substation, Rwabusoro substation, and Bugesera substations. These are HV substations. In each substation, there is an auto transformer of 93 MVA, which is considered as a big transformer, especially in Rwanda, within its current network.
Energy experts affirm that STEG and its subsidiary STEG IS is playing a critical role by exporting its services to sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East region. The company operates in Libya, Senegal, and Saudi Arabia.
The company can realize projects in renewable and traditional energy. STEG and STEG International Services have the necessary logistical and human means, as well as the technical expertise.
The new power plant in Rwanda will evacuate power to its national network. There will be an interconnection between Rwanda, Tanzania, and Democratic Republic of Congo. STEG IS substations will be integral to this interconnection. The power plant has cost $64 million. Over 200 Tunisian engineers, technicians, and administrative staff are taking part in the project. According to STEG International Services, similar projects are under study in other African countries. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
An Egyptian delegation to Baghdad, Iraq, has signed 15 agreements that aim to restore an economy shattered by decades of war, violence and terrorism. Though security and stability have not been fully restored, the Iraqi government is determined to kickstart its rebuilding process. CGTN's Yasser Hakim sheds light on the new agreements.
A flurry of deals covering a wide variety of the economy, such as maritime and land transportation, stock exchange, and manufacturing, were signed between the two nations.
We have sincere intentions to build the best mutual relationship and to raise our level of cooperation to a level of strategic partnership, not just for the benefit of both countries, but because it will be the base for regional security and stability.
Muharram Hilal is an investor and member of the Prime Minister's delegation that visited the Iraqi capital this week. He says the energy sector has been an important part of the talks. A shared electricity grid and trilateral oil pipelines between Egypt, Iraq and Jordan are now under construction.
We have surplus amounts of electricity that we can share with other countries that need electricity in return for financial or other forms of energy. As for oil, instead of selling it for $70, $80 or even $100 per barrel, we can take oil from our neighbors, process it as petrochemicals in our new mega plants and sell it at 3,000 times the price of a barrel. This is the best use for it.
Reconstruction and infrastructure projects are a vital aspect of Iraq's rebuilding process after years of war and destruction. It will be financed through an oil for reconstruction mechanism instead of cash payments.
Egypt is ready to use all the experience it has accumulated in the last 6 years and our success in implementing projects in infrastructure, energy, electricity, oil and gas, housing, real estate and transportation. We agreed to implement similar projects in Iraq using Egyptian companies and our well-trained and experienced labor.
While the agreements are meant to develop the Iraqi nation, it will also benefit Egypt economically.
There were about 5 million Egyptians living in Iraq before the conflict. With the new deals, Egyptians can still return for employment in Iraq and will be welcomed again. There's a great opportunity for the Egyptian economy to benefit from the rebuilding process in Iraq, especially now that we have the experience to do so. Egyptian companies will undertake many of the projects. And it's not just the state companies and huge developers, but the small subcontractors as well. This will become an added value for the Egyptian economy.
The 15 agreements will be ratified by the presidents and parliaments of both countries. Then a timetable will be set up to start the necessary procedures and implementation of these projects. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Despite the easing of restrictions, the COVID-19 pandemic is still slowing down infrastructure projects in Nigeria. The Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers says many construction workers are not confident to fully resume work on project sites. CGTN's Deji Badmas reports.
If there's one signature infrastructure project in Nigeria that has been badly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, it is the country's railway project, specifically the $1.6 billion Lagos-Ibadan railway project. The 156-kilometer railway line construction was originally scheduled for completion in April, but with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's now been moved to the end of the year.
We cannot be in a hurry and endanger our workers' lives. So I think it's better to wait. As they say, it's better that you are late than to become the late.
As it is with government projects, so it is with private ones. Shortly after the outbreak of the pandemic in Nigeria, the government shut down all construction sites as a means to check the spread of the disease. And even though it's been several weeks now since construction sites were allowed to reopen, developers are counting their cost.
We're developing an estate. It's a beachside estate, and it's basically sites and services. Now, the COVID has literally changed our delivery timelines. And being a project that is on a bank loan, it's really been very difficult. And right now we're trying to look for how to make up lost time, and make sure that we're able to deliver what we promised to our subscribers. So it's really been tough for everybody. And just when we're getting off that, we got into the whole protests and lockdown again. So it's really been a turbulent year.
The drastic impact of COVID-19 pandemic on infrastructure has been very devastating. I'll put them into three categories. One is the development of infrastructure, two is the construction of infrastructure, and three is the operations in the construction of infrastructure in Nigeria. In the three categories have been grossly affected by the pandemic and the lack of work to be done during the period in which the pandemic have ravaged the whole world.
For now, work is yet to fully resume at many infrastructure project sites across the country. Added to that is the devaluation of the local currency, which has driven up the cost of construction.
One of the major challenges on projects right now is the foreign exchange. So a lot of procurement work has to be redone in terms of the project, re-evaluation of the projects to know whether the costs that were put on projects before the pandemic started is also being worked on to know whether the cost implication is going to be able to go around the projects that has been done.
It's indeed a tough time for infrastructure development at the moment. Experts say it will be a while before some sense of normality returns to one's thriving industry. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
This is Global Business. We're taking a short break. Coming up, outcome of the U.S. election to have little impact on strained trade relations between China and the U.S. And hail the return of Supersonic Planes as a prototype is set to take to the skies next year.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Let's have a look at other news making headlines this hour. In Cote d'Ivoire, election tensions have sent over 3,000 200 people fleeing into neighboring Liberia, Togo and Ghana as refugees. That's according to the UN refugee agency UNHCR. Provisional results have put President Alassane Ouattara as the winner. The electoral body announced that Ouattara garnered more than 94% of the vote. The Democratic Republic of Congo has begun disarming a rebel group that has been operating in the northeast of the country for 2 decades. The process comes 8 months after the government signed a peace deal with the Front for Patriotic Resistance in Ituri. And controversy over the hijab has resurfaced in Egypt after a rural school teacher tried to force a 13-year-old girl to wear a headscarf. The incident has reignited the conversation around traditional Islamic coverings. Let's look at some of the day's top stories. All right, voting is underway in the United States in what observers are calling one of the most consequential presidential elections in recent memory. Let's bring you live pictures now of that process. There you have it. Now, due to the coronavirus pandemic, an unprecedented number of ballots were cast early. There is concern over the lack of consistency about how votes will be counted, and ongoing legal battles have made the outcome one of the hardest to predict. Latest opinion polls indicate the race is close enough in the battleground states to swing the outcome to either party, even as Biden leads Trump in national polls. Now, U.S.-China relations have hit rock bottom under President Donald Trump, despite a Phase 1 trade deal that was supposed to start putting the country's tariff battles behind them. It would be easy to think trade relations would radically improve should Joe Biden replace Trump as U.S. president, but that is unlikely. Biden is less confrontational than Trump, but many experts see little difference in their trade policies. Here's Owen Fairclough with more.
Joe Biden visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping as US Vice President in 2013, cultivating a warm relationship.
We do not fear China's rise. We want to see China rise.
The Obama administration's relationship with China was checkered, but it sunk to a new low under President Trump over trade and allegations about the origin of COVID-19 in China.
COVID-19 has become the all-consuming topic of this presidential election. And yet just before that, the trade battles waged by the Trump administration against China dominated the US agenda. And while the coronavirus has polarized Americans even more, for once, Democrats and Republicans have plenty in common when it comes to trade with China.
Biden is considered less confrontational.
Farmers all across the country have been gutted by the president's broken promises and reckless trade war.
But take a look at his economic program, and some of the language resembles Trump's, especially claims about alleged Chinese trade abuses that triggered the president's tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese imports.
Folks, manufacturing is the backbone of America.
And like Trump, Biden has a Made in America program to make the country more self-sufficient, with the kind of state support that can breach global free trade laws.
There is a tendency for all presidential candidates to get a bit nationalist. So you'll hear the same or similar nationalist rhetoric from all of the candidates over time.
But if they seem similar, Trump is trying to persuade blue-collar voters in crucial swing states that he and Biden are night and day.
I'm with America, Biden is with China. If Biden wins, China wins. If we win, America wins. North Carolina wins, Pennsylvania wins.
And even if Biden wins the White House, experts expect Trump's tariffs that have backfired on US companies and left them with steep losses to remain, at least in the short term.
If we're going to see the tariffs go away, he's going to need to sit down with the Europeans and the Canadians and the Japanese and Australians and others and say, all right, let's work out a joint approach, a joint effort against China that's going to involve litigation and negotiation and just coordinated action.
That's yet another obstacle for both US and Chinese companies trying to recover from the crippling effect of the pandemic. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
The tech sector is closely watching the U.S. presidential election to anticipate how the next administration will handle the China-U.S. technology ecosystem. The past year has been a rocky one for the sector, especially for those Chinese tech companies aiming to drive global innovation. Mark New explains.
From 5G mobile leader Huawei to instant messaging and payment platform WeChat to social media phenom TikTok. Each has been hit by restrictions and bans from the Trump administration, disrupting supply chains and sending Chinese tech investment in the U.S. plummeting.
We've seen a reduction of Chinese investment in the United States as a whole in the last several quarters, and it is something that we are looking to the next administration to really address and to rebuild and repair those relationships.
University of San Francisco international marketing professor Stanley Kwong says two-way capital flows between the U.S. and China dropped to a 9-year low.
This year is the worst. Under the past few administration, technology was quite open, right? And maybe the issue is that some people are saying they're way too open, but now it's way too much on the other side.
Facing heavy U.S. government scrutiny, Chinese investment in high-tech areas like artificial intelligence has completely shut down. But Kwong says many small and medium-sized businesses still have hopes of investing in the U.S., but in much lower tech areas such as auto and machine parts. He believes these companies want a more predictable U.S. president.
Chinese always want stability. They don't sense Trump as somebody who's very stable in decision making. And they start seeing that Biden maybe at least they understood what they need to do with the Obama administration.
The Silicon Valley Leadership Group represents more than 350 U.S. companies, many in the tech sector, including industry leaders like Apple and Facebook.
We're losing economic growth. We're losing access to supply chains. We're losing access to global research partners. And we're exposing Silicon Valley innovation economy companies to potential retribution or retaliation from foreign countries.
Professor Kwong fears that if the next president, whoever that may be, fails to address the crisis, the divide could worsen.
My belief that eventually, if we continue the U.S. same path, there would be basically two, I would say, technology system going on, right? And which is something that the Silicon Valley do not like, because Silicon Valley is so much into trying to grow and so much the whole supply chain.
Kwong says the tension hurts Chinese tech companies too. For example, the U.S. currently bans Chinese tech giant Huawei from getting TSMC semiconductors, which puts their chips several generations behind and delays its 5G products. So in this election, big tech on both sides of the Pacific watch closely, knowing that the future of access and innovation could be on the line. Mark New, CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
Over in the UK, policymakers are facing criticism as the second wave of COVID-19 cases disrupts industries all over again.
Before setting out a 5-point plan for the future, CBI's Director General said it was a shame that the Prime Minister declined to address business and industry leaders. She said there needs to be better communication, mass virus testing and more financial support.
I think there is an opportunity to create something new, a commission that brings together unions, government, business. Look what we did in the crisis of COVID. We can do the same thing to have this new chapter of building back better.
With so much uncertainty in different parts of the UK, either under lockdown or about to be for many weeks, businesses are possibly facing an even tougher time than during the first lockdown. The CBI's view on securing an EU trade deal is also clear.
It would be unconscionable to unleash a no-deal Brexit on the countries of Europe, the UK and the European Union as we are facing this vicious second wave. And I've always felt and argued that a good deal was an economic necessity. I now think it's a moral necessity as well.
Alok Sharma, the UK's business minister, deputised to defend the government.
We have the lowest corporate tax rates in the G20. The kind of lean regulation that puts us in the global top 10 for ease of doing business, and a highly skilled workforce. And it is easy to see why the UK is consistently home to one of the largest, most resilient economies in the world.
As people in England prepare for a month-long lockdown later this week, the leader of Britain's main opposition blamed the government.
The two pillars of the government's approach, the £12 billion track and trace system and local restrictions, have been swept away by the second wave and shown to be totally inadequate. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor have failed.
He criticised Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, who's in charge of the government's finance policies, for not investing enough in skills, in people or in science for the future. With economic prospects looking as gloomy as the autumn weather, politicians and business leaders are aware that more jobs are likely to be lost before the end of the pandemic. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, London.
A new commercial supersonic airliner is a step closer to reality 17 years after the Concorde stopped flying. A smaller version of that plane is now complete and the prototype is set to take to the skies next year. CGTN's Hendrik Sebrandi reports from the U.S. state of Colorado.
Well, hello and welcome.
Since 2014, Boom Supersonic founder Blake Scholl has worked towards realizing his vision of what he calls a new age of travel. That concept is now coming into view.
And I am so proud to announce Supersonic is here.
During a recent virtual rollout event in Denver, Scholl unveiled the XB-1 demonstrator, the world's first independently developed supersonic aircraft. Part of his mission
to make the world dramatically more accessible by building aircraft that are faster, less expensive, and more convenient.
It was back in 2016 when we dropped by the Colorado hangar where the startup's plans for the first supersonic jet since Concorde were taking shape.
We're very nimble compared to large aerospace companies. We don't have all the layers of bureaucracy that they have, so we can make decisions in the same hour rather than the same week.
Later that year, a mock-up of the plane, which is advanced in its aerodynamics, engines, and overall design, was unveiled to the public.
Every piece has to work, and people's lives are counting on it.
Boom will be made of carbon composite materials, which can withstand higher temperatures than the Concorde's aluminum. It'll help this plane fly even faster. Overture, as it's now called, is the commercial airliner that this plane, XB-1, which is 1/3 the length, is laying the groundwork for. It will soon undergo 36 separate tests.
We're exercising everything from the engines to the hydraulic system to the cabin pressurization. And then next year it's going to be time to take flight. And by the end of the year, we will be supersonic, setting speed records.
Traveling more than twice the speed of sound. Overture is geared for business class passengers. Each jet has a capacity of 4 dozen who want to get from London to New York in 3.5 hours. Even at $200 million a plane, and even during the pandemic, Scholl says airline interest has been strong. Japan Airlines has pre-ordered 20.
When airlines get back in growth mode, which they will sometime in the next 2, 3, 4 years, they're going to be building a new set of fleet plans from the ground up. And supersonic is going to be baked into those from day one.
Overture will only fly over oceans, at least initially, to avoid sonic booms. It's scheduled to go airborne in 2025 and board its first passengers by the end of the decade. But first, Boom will have to assure airline regulators its jet is safe and reliable.
So we welcome that scrutiny, we welcome the rigor.
His company, he says, was naive enough to start and is wise enough to finish its quest to bring the world and the future of aviation closer. This is a key step along the way. Hendrik Sebrandi, CGTN, Denver.
A look through the commodities markets, and oil prices extended their rally on U.S. election day amid a recovery in financial markets today, but concerns over surging coronavirus cases around the world capped further gains. Benchmark prices, down sharply over the past week, had a brief reprieve on Monday after Russia's oil minister held talks with domestic oil companies and a possible extension of oil output restrictions into the first quarter of 2021. OPEC Plus slashed oil output from May to support prices and tapered the cut to 7.7 million barrels per day in August. It is due to taper the cut by 2 million barrels per day in January. Still ahead in global business. Uganda grapples with dwindling farmer numbers as young people shun the practice.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The world's farming population is said to be growing older, but what worries many in the industry in Uganda is that both middle-aged and young people are shunning farming. Experienced farmers say young people are not attracted to farming as a profession, yet agriculture is the biggest source of employment. CGTN's Michael Baleke has that report.
It's lunchtime at My Passion Farm in a suburb outside Kampala city. Grace Birungi has over 2,500 poultry birds for commercial egg production. 4 years ago, she quit her nursing job to become a full-time farmer after tragically losing her previous batch of birds when she was out of town for work.
So I was like, I'm saving my boss's job, but no one is saving mine. No one is saving my savings, no one is saving my entire profits. Maybe I worked somewhere and I gained some profits, no one is saving it. I decided to, in fact, I had just qualified as a registered nurse. I decided to quit.
In Uganda, it is very unusual for someone in Grace's generation to venture into farming. Many prefer quick fix jobs like riding motorcycle taxi, popularly known as the boda boda.
So many people have engaged into other things because they believe farming is not of benefit. They don't see the value. They don't see anything profitable. Our parents, or the old people, they used to look at farming as food for home. It is not looked at as a business. But with this mindset that is into me, I look at it as my income.
In Uganda, more than 75% of the population is below the age of 30, according to the World Bank. The World Bank also puts the average age of Uganda's farmers at 54. This means the young population, who are the biggest consumers of food, have been left to an aging group of farmers, like 90-year-old Asha Nambi, who grows food for her family, but also sells to her community.
Agriculture was part of our upbringing. My dad paid our school fees from the farm. My first job was on a farm. I'm much older now, but I'm still in the garden. But children these days prefer to do other things.
Experts in agriculture say the aging farming population and the lack of young people entering the field of agriculture is worrying and poses a food security risk.
We are now going to around 46 million people. But the food production rate is still below average. So we need to double that, because as the population is increasing, it has to be commensurate with the amount of food that is there.
According to the UN Population Fund, 80% of Uganda's young people live in rural areas, where agriculture is still the main source of livelihood, but many are opting out. Young people in low-income countries like Uganda don't own any assets. It's the older generation who are capable of buying land and having some kind of capital to make such an investment. So many are sidelining agriculture to seek work in the cities. The government, through the National Farmers Federation, is now coming up with initiatives like training and farm competitions to encourage and attract young people into agribusiness. But for young farmers like Grace, teaching their young ones to appreciate agriculture at an early age is important to transition farm ownership from one generation to another and help secure the future of food production. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Invasive varieties of the cactus plant have been known to affect ecosystems across Africa. The Laikipia Permaculture Center in Kenya is creating value from invasive cactus and is protecting the environment in the process. CGTN's Nick Mudimba finds out how.
The prickly cactus plant is a danger to the environment in so many ways, but the Laikipia Permaculture Center is now using the plant to make 3 products.
After we get the fruit, we wash, then we extract the pulp. After we get the pulp, there is 3 products we make out of the pulp: juice, jam, and wine. For the process of juice, we just get the pulp, then we pasteurize to 70 degrees. After 70 degrees, then we cool it to 60. Then I pack it to the bottles. These ones, 1 liter bottle and a half. Then for the process of wine, when I get the pulp, I dilute to one pulp, 2 liters of water. Then I ferment for 14 days. After 14 days, now I package in the bottles.
The seedlings are crushed and exported to different top cosmetic farms around the world.
Lush Cosmetics has already commercialized this plant as an example of an international company. And we have also seen a lot of other people from China, from Europe, coming to find out if we have enough oil out of the cactus seed that we are producing, because it's one of the expensive oils in the world that's used in the cosmetics.
About 70 kilometers from the Permaculture Center, the cactus leaves are crushed here to make biogas, which is then used as a fuel. This helps the local community that used to cut trees to get firewood. This in turn protects the environment. Everything here is managed by a women's group from the area.
We grind the cactus leaves in a machine for 3 minutes, and then we slowly mix it with water and develop a heavy solution which we put in the feeder. It goes down and gives us gas. When we are ready to use the gas, we separate the gas and water using the valves and funnel. Then the gas goes through the pipe to the cooker.
We used to use firewood here a lot, but now things have changed for the better. We are very happy.
Now the cactus plant are a danger to biodiversity, and of course some animals eat them and die. Society here is benefiting big time courtesy of this plant. So the scorecards are actually presentable here. Will they have to plant more or get rid of them? But look, the bigger picture is actually that the community here is benefiting from jam, juice, yogurt, and of course the biogas. What next for them? Plant more or get rid of them? Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Laikipia County, Kenya.
And finally, a look at the currencies. The South African rand appreciated to 16 against the greenback today, touching its highest level since March 13th as global sentiment improved ahead of the much-anticipated U.S. presidential election. On the domestic front, investors wait for more concrete signs of recovery after latest data showed manufacturing activity continued to bounce back strongly in October, but the automotive sector weakened again. Still, the coronavirus pandemic remains in focus, with countries tightening restrictions amid surging infections. And with that, we call it a day here on Global Business. We'd love to hear from you. Send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.